So for the first time in literally years, I could go to the EVGA site where they sell Nvidia GPUs and actually find something in stock where I don't have to wait for a queue. I don't have to buy it in any type of a weird bundle. It's just there available. In fact, it was there for a couple of days where you can get a 3080 Ti at EVGA's MSRP, which admittedly it's a little more expensive than the Founders Edition, which is $11.99, but it's still $14.29, which is pretty fair considering you don't have to pay that to a scalper or get it in a bundle, which would definitely push that price up closer to $2,000. And they also had the 3080 12GB, and of course that GPU is also more expensive than you really would like to see. But after Nvidia seemingly updated this version of the 3080, that's going to be the new sort of MSRP floor for this particular GPU. Not much we can do about it except not buy it, and maybe eventually the prices will go down. So let's take a look at which GPUs that you should buy or perhaps avoid right after this word from our sponsor. Priced pretty good is a Windows CD key. Today's video sponsor is going to be VIP-CDKdeals.com. Very simple process. You can get a Windows 10 Pro CD key and remember to use code CC20 for a nice discount. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Remember to subscribe and smash that like button. They say every time you do, more and more GPUs actually get in stock without any type of silly bundles. So this is definitely a big change. I'm going to point to 3 different things that are vastly different, and this isn't just for people that have a Micro Center near them like it usually is when things get better, or even a Best Buy. This first is the EVGA website, where it's open to pretty much anybody in the country. Now, usually, you would have to sign up for the EVGA queue. That's when you sign up, and months later, some people were even a year or more later, you get a notification that you're eligible to purchase a GPU at MSRP. So this has gone through every single tier of the Nvidia GPUs on the EVGA website. Of course, some, like the very popular 3080 when it first came out, did seem to take longer than others. I remember in the beginning, I signed up for the 3090 EVGA queue, and I was able to get one within 4 to 5 weeks, so it wasn't terrible. But afterwards, I did hear stories of people waiting months and months, even for 3090s, as everything started to get much worse as we went through, 2021 and things like that. So the other day, something really interesting happened on the EVGA website. You could actually go and add to cart without any bundle, without waiting for a queue. Not every GPU was available, of course, but a 3080 Ti, the 4013, was available, as well as 1 or 2 of the 3080 12GB models. Now, the newer 12GB model of the 3080 is definitely a little bit of a weird GPU because it doesn't really offer too much more performance than the older 3080. All it's really giving you is 2 more gigabytes of VRAM, which in most use cases, you're never going to see that difference. And in fact, we already have the 3080 Ti that does precisely that and is a superior GPU to the 3080 in pretty much every single way. Now, the only thing that we could say here is the sole existence, the purpose of this GPU is so Nvidia can sort of behind the scenes raise the price of the 3080 at $699. The Founders Edition 3080 with 12GB of VRAM continues to be sort of a stellar deal, if you can call it that. Very great value to performance, especially in today's market. And as people were willing to pay upwards of $1,800 at certain points because of cryptocurrency mining and because of how good that 3080 was, Nvidia certainly saw that. And instead of launching the 12GB model of the 3080 as the Founders Edition with a little bit increase in MSRP, they decided to push it to just the third-party AIB partners. That way they can raise it up to their heart's content, and people will surely forget the original MSRP was $699, and they have a GPU that's slightly better but for a much bigger cost. Many of these, counting like some of the Asus Strix and even some of the other models, are going for basically around $1,500, which is even more than some 3080 Ti's. And in fact, that's around the price of the 3090 MSRP, the Founders Edition, which is another GPU that has gotten consistently more expensive. Even MSI and Zotac, they regularly price their quote-unquote MSRP at above $2,200 to even $2,500 or $2,600, which is definitely fairly outrageous. Now, EVGA certainly is a good example to point to because they are going to be one of the third-party manufacturers with sort of the best, most fair pricing. Not to mention, they certainly have a stellar warranty, probably the best in the industry. If you have a GPU that broke, and some of them did, remember we had all those fiascos with the 3090s. I myself had two RTX 3090 GPUs from EVGA that were replaced under RMA and warranty. Now, some people sort of complained about that towards EVGA, and they said the quality control wasn't good, especially for the 3090s, but in my experience, they replaced everything. The customer service was pretty good. Sure, they made some mistakes, but given the fact that they were willing to, RMA all of these broken GPUs that may have happened over time, I still recommend them because after all, on the market, you're going to find them most times when GPUs are in stock. It seems like this generation, especially the 4013, you see them everywhere. Like if you go to local stores and different drops and even online, the EVGA GPUs certainly were seen in most places, as opposed to some that are a little bit rarer, although they do exist, like the MSI, Zotac, Asus. They do, of course, exist in certain numbers, but EVGA, being that they're exclusively just Nvidia, for example, other companies will make, Radeon, AMD Radeon GPUs, and not just Nvidia, but EVGA probably just gets a much bigger allocation, so they're definitely seen in more places, and even though they have had issues in the past, overall their customer service seems to be pretty good, so take that as you will. Likewise, a second source that we can point to see that GPU availability, pricing, everything's getting better, AntsOnline.com has sold what they would call EVGA bundles. Now, these weren't terrible, and they were certainly better than some Newegg bundles. For example, some Newegg bundles would give you a GPU plus an older motherboard that you may not really want, maybe an inferior power supply, maybe some other stuff that's really very, very low value. Now, at least the EVGA bundles from AntsOnline, they had a couple things that were actually sort of interesting. Like, for example, you could get, a 750 or 850 watt EVGA power supply, which those are generally pretty good. You would get a keyboard, a mouse, not really, the best. You may want to get your own keyboard and mouse, but nonetheless, if you're building your system, things that are definitely usable and not complete and utter crap. Now, of course, nobody likes being forced to buy bundles, even if the components are decent or okay. They rather just be able to buy a GPU after all, but AntsOnline had these, and it was really interesting over the last few weeks and maybe the last month or two, seeing the pricing on these bundles decrease up to the point now where for the first time they are selling the GPUs separately from the bundle. Now, that's really because people aren't buying them at these prices. Previously, for example, a 3090 bundle, I've seen it as high as $2,900, which you would get an EVGA for the 3090. Okay, but then the other stuff was a power supply, keyboard, mouse, sometimes like an AIO, the EVGA AIO. Certainly for $2,900 was really, really overpriced, but people seem to have bought them because the price stayed pretty high for a while, and then eventually that price seemed to go down in sort of $200 increments. It went down to $2,700, $2,500, $2,300 was around the lowest that I saw. And then of course, if you buy the GPU by itself, traditionally the MSRP should be 19 something or around $2,000 for the EVGA 3090. So interesting to see that coming down, and within the last few weeks, when they had a bundle, it seemed like it stayed in stock a lot longer than it previously would have stayed. Now, I remember when something would come in stock, you would get a notification. Even being a bundle, people would purchase these pretty rapidly, and you pretty much wouldn't be able to buy them after a few minutes, pretty much like every other GPU release. Over the last several weeks, it seems like these have stayed in stock for a number of days, even some of the cheaper bundles with like a 3060 or something like that. So as a result, the prices kept going down and down, and then finally until they sell individual GPUs. Now, some of these still sell out, so it's not like the market is completely fixed, but certainly it seems like that the prices have come down a considerable amount and availability is a lot better. And then the third area that I'm going to point to, of course, we have Best Buy and Microsoft Center, the local stores. I can say from experience, for example, Micro Center last week seemed to get a pretty big shipment of, a 3070 Ti's at their existing MSRP, which even though it's expensive, it's still sort of the MSRP of the third-party models. For example, they have a bunch of MSI Supreme 3070 Ti around $949, which is a lot more than a $599 Founders Edition 3070 Ti, but after all, that's pretty much the price that it is now. So these have stayed in stock for a pretty considerable amount. Not only did they get a lot in stock, we're talking about over 25 of this particular GPU. They really did seem to take actually quite a while to sell out. In fact, a lot are still available this week if you check now, at least in certain Micro Centers. And they got a bunch of, 3050, 3060s, even 3080s, and some 3090s as well, but those do seem to still sell out pretty quickly. Of course, they have a lot of advantages. They're still very powerful. They're sort of going to be not the light hash rate. They're the only GPUs that sort of escape that moniker, aside from some of the Founder Edition GPUs. And I guess MSRP 3090 seems to be a relatively good value compared to scalper pricing that it was before. So who knows what's going on there, and I'm sure they're getting less of them now, even though certainly it still is a pretty expensive GPU. All right, so having seen all this information, we see GPUs first much longer in stock across the board, not only in the physical stores but online as well. Even on Newegg had GPUs in stock. We're seeing pricing coming down to a certain limit, but should you buy, and what are the things you should be more concerned about? Well, one of the lasting effects, unfortunately, of this GPU drought, even though things are getting a little better now, is that pricing from the companies has really increased quite dramatically. Look at the example that I mentioned of the 3080 12GB. Not much better than a 10GB 3080, but literally about twice the price in many cases. So you're getting very little value for that price increase. Prices have gone up for every single model GPU. We're talking about 3060s. Of course, AMD GPUs as well. The pricing has historically been even higher in some cases than Nvidia. And a lot of these GPUs stayed on the shelves, like 6800 XTs for over $1,200 or $1,300 for the majority of the year. Now they're starting to dip down a little bit more. So this is going to be pretty much a problem across the board. Pricing levels have gone up, and I'm sure if they're not selling them, they're going to stay in stock longer like we've been seeing it. And who knows if prices will come down a little more. I suspect they may just sort of slow down production a little bit instead of having these sort of flood the market and have the availability just be way too easy, causing prices to continue to go down, which is going to be probably worse for what these companies have been expecting in terms of sales. Before, they could release pretty much anything at any price and it would seemingly sell pretty well. Even the 6500 XT from AMD, which is one of the worst GPUs released in the year, if not the worst GPU released during pretty much GPU history. It's really limited in very many ways and carried a pretty expensive price on the market. Alright guys, so let me know what you think about what's going on now with availability and pricing, and keep in mind that RTX 4000 might be released at the end of this year. So what do? Do you buy a GPU? Do you wait? Is it possible that prices may get even worse with RTX 4000? So remember to stay subscribed as we cover it, more and more news and GPUs that come out. So remember to smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.